Welcome to the Family Answer Man podcast. Today's episode is part 2 of our top 10 episode where we revisit some of the most frequently asked questions on the Family Answer Man with a fresh, new perspective from a biblical worldview. So if you haven't listened to part 1, you may want to pause this one, go back and listen to part 1 first, and come back to this spot. But I am your host, David Orgis, and I am here with Dr. Mark Crosby, pastor, educator, and marriage and family therapist, and the resident expert on the Family Answer Man podcast, where we tackle tough questions that families face and discuss practical solutions that really do work. This podcast is not a therapy session. We're not able to give specific advice to your situations. But we do believe that mental health and spiritual health are very serious issues, and family dynamics can be and often are very complicated. So, for in-depth answers to your questions, we encourage you to seek professional counsel specific to your unique circumstances. Now, if you would take a second right now to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the notification bell, you'll never miss an episode of the Family Answer Man. And if you're listening via podcast, take a moment to follow, to rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. It really does help us out, and we appreciate it greatly. If our content has helped you at all, please share the Family Answer Man with your family and friends so that they can join you on this journey of building a stronger, healthier, and happier family. Well, Dr. Mark, this is part 2 of our top 10 episode, and
Yes.
we may get some bonus questions today. We'll see how it goes.
Okay.
We got through 6 questions on our part 1 show, which has aired on the radio and can be found on our YouTube page.
Right.
So what is your favorite thing about doing top 10 episodes?
Well, I think all of us have questions, and all of us, I think, want some answers to some of the things we're commonly or frequently hearing about concerning, what is narcissism, or what is depression, or how does one get through a depressive, season of life, or how do you deal with defiant children? And I think all of us have these questions, and all of us come into these situations, whether it be within our family or in some cases in our churches, maybe even our own businesses. Because the reality is that people are people, and they're going to come into a family, into a church, into a business with a variety of different perspectives and experiences and perceptions and expectations. And sometimes knowing how to deal with these individuals, knowing how to work with them, knowing how to lead them, knowing how to manage their situation is powerful and important. And so we ask questions like, how do you handle a defiant kid? Or what do you do when someone has a narcissistic personality, or someone is just, very, very difficult to deal with. And so, and how to do it, in a way that is productive and helpful, and in a way that is meaningful, and yet and still trying to understand where they are, but yet and still accomplish, the goal and the mission that you have set forth, whether it be in your church, in your business, in your family.
Yep. Keep the eye on the prize.
Right.
And so you kind of teased some of the questions. Yes. So we'll go ahead and we will jump into the second half of our top 10 questions that we've received just over the year.
Sure.
For the Family Answer Man. So this is the part 2 episode. Question number 1 for today, which is question number 7, is, would you please explain narcissism?
Yeah, narcissism, again, is a word we're hearing a lot these days. It's almost becoming a buzzword for anybody you don't like. So,
yes.
So what's happening is that, if you don't like your boss, you don't like, your spouse, you don't like, the person, sitting next to you in church, you don't like, the person that's, 3 doors down from you, because of their attitude or because of their behavior, you automatically call them a narcissist. Right. And they very well may be. But a narcissist basically is not the final proper, definition or description or a diagnosis, quote unquote, because what narcissism really is a personality disorder. And a personality disorder, basically, why it's called a disorder is because a person with a disorder lacks adaptability, meaning they only know how to function one way.
Okay.
Most people without a disorder per se, basically can adopt very regularly, very quickly in most settings. They know when to be quiet. They know when to speak up. They know when to be aggressive. They know when to be submissive. And so the point simply is that people normally who can manage life and relationships fairly well aren't considered disordered. But a personality disorder means I don't know how to adapt. I'm going to be one song, one flavor in every situation. And sometimes and many times, oftentimes, perhaps that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so they come across disordered because they only have one song, they only have one flavor, and you can only play one song and one flavor in one situation. But most of us are in multiple situations throughout the day or throughout the week or throughout the month. So the point simply is that narcissism is, again, a personality disorder because they lack adaptability. And what that means simply is this. The narcissist, again, personality disorder is one of 9 personality disorders. As a matter of fact, or actually one of 10, I should say. As a matter of fact, their particular focus and emphasis or problem is their image. They want to make sure that their image is superior, their image is not tarnished. It's all about their image. They are very self-centered, very self-absorbed. Those are the key words for a narcissistic personality disorder. And again, the main thing, they have this superior attitude. If you were to read the diagnostic manual from the American Psychiatric Association, what you'd read is that the narcissist has a grandiose sense of self-importance. They exaggerate achievements, talents, and they expect to be recognized as superior without any real achievement. And so basically what they're saying is that they want to be better, look better, sound better, be superior, even though they've done nothing really per se to gain that. Or they've not gained to the level of what they think. And so they may be the president of the Homeowners Association, but they think they're the president of the United States.
Right.
Okay, so there's a difference.
Yes.
Okay, so the point is that they have this grandiose sense of self-importance. Secondly, they're often preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success. In other words, they're constantly thinking of themselves as being the next fill in the blank. Interestingly enough, today is August the 16th. And if I remember correctly, it is the anniversary of the death of Elvis Presley.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, it's one of those moments for me as where were you when that happened kind of thing. But anyway, the point is that a lot of people who are narcissists think of themselves as, I'm going to be the next Elvis Presley. Right. I'm going to be the next, fill in the blank, superstar, because they have this thought of, I want to be powerful and brilliant, and I want this sense of ideal love, and I want this sense of people thinking of me as being extremely beautiful or extremely handsome or whatever. So they're preoccupied with these fantasies. Thirdly, they believe that they should have special or unique treatment, that they can only be understood by other people with similar high status, if you will. So they believe that they are special. They have this sense of needing and wanting and desiring unique treatment, and they can only be understood by like-minded people. Fourthly, they require excessive admiration. They will fish for how great am I? How wonderful am I? And did you see what I did? And so they really are wanting excessive admiration. Next, they have a sense of entitlement. Again, they want others to comply with everything they say or do. They believe that if a person doesn't comply with them, they're unreasonable. Next, they are very exploitative. They take advantage of other people. They're the ones who, as we've heard in business world, they'll stab you in the back to get to the next level. And so they have this sense of, again, exploitation. Number 7, if you will, if you're kind of keeping count, they lack empathy. They really do not care if what they said or did hurt your feelings, as long as they're achieving and gaining what they want. Not only that, they're often envious of others. If others have achieved something, their thought is, why didn't I achieve that? Or how did they get that? Or why are they driving that? Or how did they, how did he get her? Kind of thing. So they have this sense of being envious of others, or they want others to be envious of them. So they will drive a car they can't afford. They will live in a house they can't afford. They will buy clothes they really can't afford, just so that others will see them and think of them in a different light, or maybe even be envious. And last of all, they're very arrogant and they're very haughty in their attitude. So that's the narcissist. And again, we've all have worked with this person. We've all have seen this person. Maybe you live with this person. But the thing about the narcissist is that they just think they're superior, better, and greater. That's why they do not do well in relationships, and that's why they don't do well in therapy. A narcissist will go into the therapist's office thinking, I'm smarter than the therapist, or I need to tell the therapist how to do their job, or I need to tell the therapist, what's really wrong with everybody and why I am always right. And so you'll see this person, like I said, in business. You'll see this person in churches. You'll see this person in church board meetings. And for the pastors who are listening out there, this is the one who's going to give you the most fits, the most problems at every board meeting that you go to. Beware of them. They are everywhere. They're smarter than the pastor. They're better than the pastor. They're smarter than the CEO. They're better than the CEO. They're smarter than the doctor. They're better than the doctor. That is your typical narcissist. It's rare that they ever come down off that pedestal. Many times they have to have the proverbial Apostle Paul experience where they are knocked off their horse and blinded for a while and humbled, if you will. And then and only then will they may rethink their position and their disorder and how to start making some changes. One way of treating anybody with personality disorder, by the way, is giving them an example of how they can function differently and more productively and more effectively in a relationship, in a church setting, in a business setting, et cetera, where they see someone who gives them a better example as to how to live. In other words, they need to mimic the person that they are working with, looking up to, being coached by, et cetera. So that is the narcissist. It's a personality disorder that is tough to deal with, but in some miraculous ways, they can get better.
There is hope. It's not a death sentence.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we're going to stick on the topic of personality disorders with our next question.
Yes.
So we're going to go from narcissism to the next question that we have is, what is borderline personality disorder?
Yeah. And again, there's no real in-depth research that, again, is going to maybe enforce what I'm about to say, but my experience has been, and I think most of my colleagues would agree, and that is most of the people with narcissism are going to be men. I mean, there are female narcissists, don't misunderstand me. There are. But in most cases, it's more apparent in men. The same is true, though, with borderline. But just the opposite, meaning most of my experience has been that most women will fall under the category of a borderline personality disorder as opposed to men. Does it mean that men aren't borderline? Definitely are. But the reality is my experience has been that most men will present as narcissistic. Most women will present with a borderline personality disorder. Again, borderline or personality disorders, I should say, means I have trouble adapting. So what is a borderline personality disorder? What are some of the key words that you have to look for? The key word is unstable. The borderline is unstable. They fear abandonment. They use emotions. They use seduction to sometimes maintain power and control. Here are some of the symptoms, if you will, of the borderline personality disorder as given in the diagnostic manual. Number one, they have these frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. In other words, they fear that they're going to be abandoned, someone's going to leave them, they're going to be alone, etc. And so they do have this sense of fear of being abandoned. Number two, they have a pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships. And so what happens is that 1 minute the borderline will love you, the next minute they'll hate you. 1 minute they'll say, don't leave me. The next minute they'll say, get out of my house. So they are very unstable. They're back and forth. And most people struggle with that. You know, most people, if you tell them, get out of my house, never come back, they'll go, okay, and they'll leave. Well, the borderline will say that. And then, 2 minutes later, they'll start begging them to come back. And then 3 minutes after that, they'll start telling them to leave again. And then 3 minutes later, they'll beg them to come back. And so there's this instability that you see with the borderline. Thirdly, they have these identity disturbances, which means they have this unstable self-image or sense of self. One moment they think they are okay, the next minute they say they're not okay. Meaning 1 minute they will quote unquote like themselves, the next minute they'll hate themselves. 1 minute they think they're beautiful, the next minute they think they're ugly. And so there's this instability about even who they are. They're impulsive. Meaning sometimes they will go on spending sprees or substance abuse or reckless driving or binge eating or get involved in some promiscuous behaviors. So they're very impulsive. They can do something without any thought or regard of consequence. Next, they have this sometimes recurrent suicidal behavior or gestures or threats. These are the people who self-mutilate sometimes. These are the ones who sometimes get involved in cutting. Next, they have this instability due to these mood swings. Again, irritable, anxious, episodic, if you will. And so there's these terrible mood swings you see within the borderline. Next, they're constantly saying how empty they are. There's these chronic feelings of emptiness. There's these chronic feelings of feeling like there's nothing inside of me. I just feel empty all the time. Next, they have these inappropriate, intense angers, and they sometimes struggle with controlling their anger. They go into a rage. They fly off the handle, as your grandmother would say. Sometimes they get caught up in physical altercations or fights or threats of violence. And not only that, they have a sense of paranoia. And sometimes they basically will even change from being this quiet, gentle person one moment to this raging, violent, aggressive individual the next. And some would call that a form of disassociation, where we used to call that, multiple personalities. And so, but when a person goes from being, what I call the proverbial librarian, then to the MMA cage fighter, in a matter of moments, that's a form of disassociation. So there's that element as well. So the borderline really does struggle with relationships, and like the narcissist, they're very difficult to treat. Like the narcissist, they often need to have a role model of sorts to give them some sense of this is how you behave, this is how you respond, this is how you react to certain situations. And that role model, therapist, best friend, whomever is working with this person, can be a source of inspiration and influence in their life to make some changes.
Okay. Well, it sounds like both the narcissist and the borderline personality disorder, someone that's struggling with that, can overcome those things,
right,
but is going to have the right person to help them do that.
Exactly. And both of these personality disordered individuals basically are just very difficult to relate to. And what happens is that once you're involved with them, it's sometimes difficult to walk away. Many a wife has said to me how her narcissistic husband is very difficult to live with. Many a man has said to me how difficult it is to live with his borderline wife, but they're not quite sure what to do or how to manage the relationship or how to even, walk away because they're just so ingrained and entrenched in what's going on.
Yeah. Well, we're going to move on to our third question for the day.
Yes.
This is question number 9. So we're doing great for our top 10.
Yes.
We might get to some of our bonus questions. We'll
Yes.
see. The question that came in for number 9 is one of our most asked questions is what causes depression?
Wow. Yeah. And so there's a lot of literature on that subject. And so we could spend, all afternoon talking about this particular topic, what causes depression. But in a nutshell, there are 5 main things that I have dealt with in my practice in dealing with depression. Number 1, you have the proverbial chemical imbalance or hormonal imbalance. So our hormones and our brain chemistry really does impact and affect our mood. And so therefore, chemical imbalance or hormonal imbalance can be a cause of depression. Mm-hmm. Number 2, relational social change. Believe it or not, that when any change, even good changes, happen in our life, there is a depression sometimes associated with that change. Whether you got a promotion, you moved to a new community, you graduated high school or college, you have that new baby, that new child, whatever it may be, these are all events, so to speak, that can create a depression, even though some of these events are positive and maybe even happy events. But the reality is that anytime there's a relational social change, there is a mild depression that comes with it. Now, when the changes are negative, you lost that job, You didn't graduate. You failed that exam. You didn't get into that school. You were hoping that this time, you would conceive and have the child, but still no conception. These are all very negative times in our life that can create a depression. And so again, anytime there's a relational social change, or you had to move to another community, or you had to leave, the neighborhood you grew up in because of the transfer. So whenever there's a relational social change, that too can create depression. Thirdly, and the one that you heard a lot in the 50s and 60s was depression is anger turned inward. When you're angry with yourself. When you wanted to accomplish or wanted to achieve something or wanted to do something and it didn't happen, and you basically blame yourself or your inabilities or your lack of training or your lack of opportunity or whatever was going on, but you're angry with yourself. And so when that anger is turned inward, then a depression can follow. A fourth one is, and again, this is perhaps the most universal, is a feeling of hopelessness and helplessness. When you feel like there is no hope, when you feel like there's nothing more that can be done, when that door will not open, when that opportunity is gone, when that person is never coming back. So there's that sense of hopelessness and helplessness that creates and causes that depression. And then fifthly, very similar to the last two or three, was a sense of loss and grief. When you have lost something, when you're grieving because of a loss, whether it be loss of a job, a loss of a loved one, maybe even many people go through a depression during retirement, which kind of lends itself back to number two, relational social change. So anytime there's loss or grief, a depression often follows. But again, the reality is that depression is when you have a deep, profound sadness that lasts more than 2 weeks. And so whenever anyone has a deep or profound sadness that will not go away, because we all get sad, right?
Right.
We all get sad. I mean,
and with good reason. Something doesn't go our way. We didn't get what we were hoping for. Someone didn't meet our expectations. We were disappointed, and we all get sad. But when the sadness lasts more than 2 weeks, and that sadness is deep and profound, then depression is now starting to take over. And that's when you need to be mindful that, again, depression, like a fever, if it's not treated, will continue to get higher and higher. And then the depression then becomes the main problem. Just like when a fever gets to 104, now the fever is the problem. Right.
And you have to do something to reduce it.
Yeah, because the symptoms can be the problem sometimes.
Exactly.
In the acute situation.
Exactly.
But that's a perfect segue to our 10th question for the top 10, which is, what are some of the treatments and remedies for depression?
Yeah, and so I would say these are the top three that I have seen work. And again, we're just going to do an overview, a very generic overview of the top treatments for depression. Number one, for some people, medication is helpful. So let's just begin there. If there is a hormonal imbalance, if there is a chemical imbalance, then sometimes your physician will prescribe a medication that sometimes can be helpful. Not everybody likes to take medications for depression, but sometimes it is useful and can be helpful. Secondly, for most people that, especially maybe in our listening audience, they like a more natural remedy. And what that sounds like, what that looks like is, for example, I will argue that if you will spend some time, maybe 30 minutes in the morning or 30 minutes in the afternoon or both, getting out and walking. Just getting physically moving. Exercise, just getting out and walking. And for our listening audience, they may appreciate this, but just having what I call a prayer walk. Where if you're a person of prayer, which I think most of our listening audience is, but you just get out and you just walk around the block, walk down your street and back 2 or 3 times, whatever. Go to the local park and just walk the track, whatever. And while you're walking, pray. The Bible talks about, laying our burdens before Him. He cares for us. There are many, many scriptures that speak to this. Jesus talks about, be mindful about how you worry or not to worry, because again, He cares for us. And so, so when you get out and you're walking and you're praying while you're walking, that does a lot to you both spiritually as well as physically as well as psychologically. So a prayer walk. Next, some will say that there's some research that indicates that supplements like St. John's wort is helpful in dealing with our depression. Also, what I loved, what Kerry Jones used to say, for those who don't know who Kerry Jones was, he was, I think, one of the first state licensed psychologists in the state of Louisiana. And he used to always say, do something kind or do something benevolent every day for someone else. It doesn't have to be anything deep or major, even expensive. But, he would often say, if you go to the store, buy a plant for your neighbor and just bring it over and say, hey, I was thinking of you. And they'll go, what? Wow, that's so nice, or whatever. Or, cut someone's grass, when it's, in the cool of the day. But do something kind for someone, bake some cookies for the local fire department or the local nursing home or whatever. But do something kind and benevolent every day for someone. Give that little kid who has a lemonade stand, on the corner of your street, give them $5 for a little glass of Kool-Aid, and watch them light up and watch how you're going to impact their life. But do something for someone that's nice, that's benevolent every day, and you'll start to recognize and see how that begins to really change your life. And thirdly, psychotherapy also is often very helpful as it helps the person with depression find doors that they need to go through, to find new options, to find new opportunities, and to maybe rethink where they are, to maybe rethink what's going on, to maybe restructure and reframe what's happening in their life so that they can begin to restructure, rethink how they see themselves, how they see life, and how they see their situation. And oftentimes that helps begin to alleviate some of the depression.
And when we look at that, it doesn't have to be one of those three. Oftentimes, a three-prong approach is very,
of course. I've seen clients do all three of these things. I've seen clients do one of these things or a combination thereof. And so, because depression, like anything else, sometimes may require more than just one treatment plan.
Yep. All right, we're going to get one real lightning fast round bonus question in, I think. The question is this, and it's a big question to answer real quick.
Okay.
But how does one handle defiant children?
Okay.
I promise I didn't write this one in.
That's okay. Number one, we'll make this quick. Number one, don't get into a power struggle with a defiant child. In other words, as Dr. James Dobson used to always say, if you get into a power struggle, you must win. Number two, stop the show. If they're defiant in the store, if they're defiant, in the car, you stop the show, you go back to the house, you don't create an audience where they are showing their defiance. Number three, it's okay sometimes to let them have their emotions, meaning if they say, but I hate you, or you're the worst mom ever, or you're the worst dad ever, okay, let them have their emotion. As long as you limit it to there's no violence and there's no destruction. You're not going to hit anybody, you're not going to hurt anybody, and you're not going to destroy anything. But sometimes they need to have their emotion and let them know that, hey, their emotions are their emotions, and you know what? They really don't impact me. You can tell me you hate me if you want, but the bottom line, you still have to do your homework, okay? The bottom line, you still can't go to your friend's house. Bottom line, you still have chores to do. Next, give them achievable punishments, meaning, you don't say, you're grounded for 4 years. Say, look, for the next 4 days, I want you to be home for 5 o'clock. Your curfew used to be 6 o'clock, but now you can be home for 5 o'clock. But if you can do that for the next 4 days, we will extend it to 6 o'clock later on. But give them things that are achievable. Stand firm on your restrictions. Don't let them pull down the power and tell you what they're not going to do or going to do. Stand firm on your restrictions. And also, again, if they will not obey your authority, let them obey the next higher authority, meaning they say, well, I'm just going to run away. If they run away, you let the police know, hey, this kid ran away. If you need to take them to juvie hall for a few hours, take them to juvie hall. And last of all, sometimes let the consequences play out. Don't rescue them every time, because sometimes consequences are the best teacher for a defiant child.
Well, there you have it from the Family Answer Man, part 2 of our top 10 questions that we've gotten from the Family Answer Man. I want to say thank you again for joining us. We want to thank the incredible people at Winter's Air and Days Smokehouse for underwriting this show. And as always, we hope that this episode of the Family Answer Man will encourage you and inspire you to make changes that will lead to a stronger, healthier, and happier family.